Hey there, this is Matt with State of Flex here with a review for Weapons. This is an unusual one, folks. I actually saw it over a week ago and have really decided to take my time and determine where it landed for me because it's unusual. There's a lot to unpack with this film, while it also being a pretty straightforward and streamlined movie all at the same time. So I didn't really know how I felt about it. I know while I was watching the movie, at a certain point, I thought I was watching one of the three best movies of the year. And I was blown away. And I'm going to be upfront that there's nothing in this movie that I really dislike at all. But it does something that didn't necessarily land for me. We'll unpack that as we get there. But first, let's stick to the positives, of which there are many, and many of them involve the cast. Julia Garner is extraordinarily good. She's having a bit of a moment this summer where she is just taking control of a movie when she's on screen and being absolutely the most compelling and captivating thing about it in the moment. I really like what she did as Silver Surfer. I don't think she had enough screen time in that movie. For every moment she was in, I was like invested. And similarly, here she is incredibly good and able to flex those dramatic muscles that she is capable of flexing. She is so incredibly good in a textured and nuanced performance that easily could have been written as one note, but isn't, and she elevates the role. Josh Brolin also is fantastic. Alden Ehrenreich is also amongst one of the best performances I've seen him give. He is really, really good. Everybody in this film is in their top form. I think Zach Cregger, who is the director of this and Barbarian, which was one of my favorite films of 2022, he does a great job with direction. He steps up his game from that movie, which was more of a straightforward, honest horror movie, to give you more of a psychological thriller that's relatively grounded until it's not. And he is able to capitalize on both the grounded, pathos-infused, dramatic thriller moments, as well as the off-the-walls and bonkers horror moments. I'm going to touch on that shortly because that dives into my criticisms more. But I think this film painted a really compelling picture that is infused with many different themes. There are, for me, this film read as the dangers of addiction. There's some obvious ones like the addict character who drives a chunk of the film. And also Julia Garner's character being an alcoholic. You get a sense or a tone that Alden Ehrenreich's character also had a bit of a drinking problem at one point in his life, perhaps when he was back with her character earlier in their relationship. But then you even see the addiction of finding out what happened in this mystery through the Josh Brolin character. There's this sense of addiction all throughout the film, and that really read strong for me. But this is a movie that's not of one theme, it's of many. In talking with some of my peers, they read it as a allegory for trauma and how people deal with it, or an allegory for gun violence and the relevance it's had on our society and how people don't just recover from that. Even if they've experienced it and lived through it, they can't just live once more. There's something that has been taken from them. And that's something that's echoed with one of the last lines in the movie. But I think that's also in an area where the movie is a little messy, where it's kind of saying a lot of things, but none of it is necessarily laser focused. So it kind of scattershots its themes like a shotgun at you, and you're able to just grasp. And some filmmakers are able to do that exceptionally well. I think Jordan Peele did that with with Us, which is a film that isn't necessarily full of laser-focused themes, but scattershot ones. However, basically every prism with which you watch the movie from, it works incredibly, profoundly well. And this movie, I don't think is the case. I think like the gun violence prism of viewing this film doesn't necessarily hold water, because you don't even get a sense of gun violence in the film, and the only suggestion of it visually is the gun that hangs over the house during one of the nightmare sequences. But I think that's sort of the problem. Maybe he's not as gifted at driving forward themes as maybe some of his directorial peers. But that is not to say that about 8/10 of this movie is some of the best movie I've seen all year. It really just kind of falls apart for me in the last 25 minutes, and it falls apart in the same way as The Substance did. If you remember, my review for The Substance was that movie, I was convinced I was watching like the best movie of the year up until it wasn't, and that was because the last 15 minutes were like a completely different sense and tone to the entire rest of the picture. And this is much the same way. There's a little bit of dark humor, or more like the gallows humor throughout the first hour and 45 minutes of Weapons. But the last act is so bonkers and becomes laugh out loud, grimly funny, to the point where it felt like I was more watching an Evil Dead sequel than I was watching the conclusion to the movie that had been presented in front of me for the first hour and 45 minutes. And that is a criticism, because unlike the substance, where it comes to a natural conclusion, where forever after I will stop the movie upon rewatch when it gets to its natural conclusion and fades to black for an instant before its final bonkers 15 minutes, that film feels closed at that point, and everything else is this mad epilogue that could be. This doesn't have a conclusion to the movie outside of the bonkers tone shift. It felt like I was watching a grounded psychological thriller that suddenly pivoted into a Simpsons Treehouse of Terror episode, and Treehouse of Horror episode, and that felt too jarring for me. And yet, it's still great in its ending. The children running through walls and bursting through the house is an image that will live rent-free in my head forever after. I laughed out loud at the conclusion of this movie multiple times, and the villain gets their comeuppance in a grimly satisfying way. And yet, in having a discussion with one of my coworkers, hey Barnaby, if you're watching, shout out to you, he made a really good point, and one that I can't argue with, which was Barbarian was so successful in its sudden shifts that it felt like he tried to do that with this film just over and over and over again, and gave you basically the exact same ending where the villain gets their comeuppance in the most grimly humorous way, and it's both shocking and horrifying and absurdly funny, that it's hard not to notice that he's kind of right with that criticism. This does seem to hit a lot of the same notes of Barbarian, just longer and louder. I personally think that this is a better movie than Barbarian. What works better than anything in Barbarian, and Barbarian was one of my favorite movies the year it came out. Thus, this is also currently one of my favorite movies the year it has come out. And yet, between the two movies, one is more polished and focused and feels genuinely its own jewel that is ready to go with far less criticism than this film, which feels not so polished and confusingly unusual in its conclusion. It's a completely unsatisfying conclusion for the story presented before it. And I can't make that criticism for Barbarian, so it's weird. Even though I prefer this movie to that, I think that's the better movie between the two. That being said, I do like this movie. It's just outside of my top 10 movies of the year. It is very, very good, and come award season, I hope it is recognized for some of the performances, particularly Garner or Brolin, who are very, very good. And the makeup is pretty great, as is the cinematography. I really like how they did some of these shots, and the just general look of the film is quite strong. Yeah, what did you guys think of Weapons? Did it work for you? Did the ending... I've talked to some people who think the ending is by far the best part of the movie, and I think the ending is great in its own way. It just feels like that's the ending to an Evil Dead sequel that we haven't gotten more than this. Cat, what are you doing? Sorry. The cat just went bonkers, and now he's caressing me. Good times. Anyway, what did you think of Weapons? Let me know in the comment area down below. Thanks for watching, like, subscribe, do all that good stuff. Peace!